At panghuli, hiling ng Pangulo ang isang tahimik na undas. Kaugnay ng polisiya ng mabuting pamamahala or good governments, pinirmahan po ni Presidente ang Administrative Order number 34 noong Biyernes, October 23 na inatasan ang mahigpit na pagsunod ng lahat ng ahensya at instrumentality sa buong ehekutibo sa procurement process na may transparency at accountability. COVID-19 update naman po tayo. Ito po ang general update ayon po sa Johns Hopkins. Higit 43 milyong tao na po or 43,421,678 ang tinimaan ng COVID-19 sa buong mundo. Meron na po tayong 1,158,321 katao naman ang binawi ng buhay dahil sa coronavirus. Nangunguna pa rin po ang Estados Unidos, 8.6 million, 225,000 deaths. Pangalawa po ang India, 7.9 million, 119,000 deaths. Brazil, 5.3 million, 157,000 deaths. Russia, 1.5 million, 26,000 deaths. At France, 1.2 million, 35,052 deaths. Dito naman po sa atin, meron na tayong 36,333 active cases ang ayon po sa October 25 case bulletin ng DOH. Ito po ay mula sa kabuong bilang ng kaso na 371,630. Ibig sabihin po, 9.8 ang porsyento ng aktibong kaso. Sa mga aktibong kaso, 82.6% ay mild, 10.9% ay asymptomatic, 4.1 ay critical, 2.3 ay severe. 328,258 ang nai-report na gumaling. Ito po ay 88.3% mula sa kabuuang bilang ng kaso ng COVID-19 sa bansa. Samantalang nasa 7,039 naman po ang binubuhay ng buhay dahil sa coronavirus. Nakikiramay po kami sa inyo. Naka-flash naman po sa ating screen ang critical care capacity ng ating mga hospital. 58% pa po ang available ng ating mga ICU beds. 57% naman po ang isolation beds available, samantalang 65% ang available sa ating ward beds. At meron po tayong 80% available na ventilators. Pero hindi naman po ibig sabihin na kayo magiging pabaya, no? Parating na po ang bakuna. Ang nais po ng Presidente, abutan natin lahat ang bakuna. Kaya wag po tayong tumigil ng ating mask, hugas at iwas. Pag-ingatan natin ang buhay para tayo po ay makapaghanap buhay. Dito po nagtatapos ang ating briefing. Meron po tayong dalawang panauhin. Unang-una po si Food and Drug Administration Director General Dr. Eric Domingo at galing po sa Sahar Pharma Adil Dedi Biria. I hope I pronounce his name right. Now, ang final quarantine classification po natin ay ilalabas po natin sa Oktubre 29. Okay. So, Dr. Eric Domingo, kahapon po, bisita namin si Dr. Professor Emeritus, teacher niyo rin po, si Dr. Lulu Bravo. At ang sabi po niya, kung meron na pong bakuna sa COVID-19 na na-approve ng FDA sa kanilang bansa, po pwede naman pong pag-aralan ng FDA kung po pwede na rin gamitin sa Pilipinas na ito na hindi dumadaan sa clinical trial. Ano ba ho ang proseso kung bukas po ang China FDA ay mag-aproba ng bakuna laban sa COVID-19? Gaanong katagal po pag-aaralan ng FDA itong bakunang ito para ma-authorize din ang paggamit sa Pilipinas? Dr. Domingo, the floor is yours.
Ay, maraming salamat, Sir Kari. Magandang tanghali po. So yun po, nabibigyan natin kayo ng konting ideya kung ano yung pagdadaan ng proseso sa FDA. Ang isa pong bakuna na dinedevelop, dalawa po ang pwedeng proseso na pagdaanan sa FDA. Unang-una, maaari po silang gumawa ng clinical trial dito at magpa-approve po dito sa atin. Pangalawa naman po, pag ang produkto ay ready na for registration, then maaari din po nilang i-register yon dito sa Pilipinas. So ito po yung first slide natin, nakita na po ng karamihan sa atin ito. Ang clinical trial po ng isang bakuna ay napakarami pong steps niyan. And it usually takes 7 to 8 years. Pero ngayon po na nagmamadali ang buong mundo at nagtutulong-tulong lahat po ng siyentipiko, mukhang napapabilis po natin ito ng 1 taon. Ano? Sa ngayon po, meron mga halos 200 na candidate vaccines. But 8 of them, nandun na po sa bandang kanan, yung kulay green na clinical trial phase 3. Ang ibig pong sabihin nun, dumaan na siya sa clinical trial phase 1, kung saan sinubukan siya sa malulusog na mga pasyente, mga bata, walang sakit at hindi exposed sa coronavirus, at tinitingnan yung kanyang safety profile, kung meron po siyang side effects, at saka kung nag-i-induce po siya ng immune response. So pag pumasa po siya doon, usually po yun mga 100 patients, 20 to 100 patients. Pag pumasa siya doon, mag-clinical trial phase 2 naman po. Yung clinical trial phase 2 naman po, ibig po sabihin, mas maraming pasyente, mga a few hundred to a few thousand na people na maaari pong exposed din sila sa coronavirus. So tinitingnan po yung safety niya rin, ang kanyang side effects, at saka po yung kanyang immune response na nakukuha ng pasyente. At kung maganda po ang resulta nun, doon na po ang papasok yung clinical trial phase 3 na tinatawag nila. At kung mababalitaan po nyo, ang ginagawang mga phase 3 trials ngayon, anywhere from 20,000 to 30,000 patients. So maramihan po talaga ito. At mga pasyente po ito na nasa komunidad para makita kung effective ba ang bakuna na mag-prevent ng COVID sa kanila, kung mild lang ba ang side effects ito, at saka pati po yung mga unusual, at saka yung mga rare na mga adverse events, makikita lamang yan kung malakihan ang mga clinical trial phase 3. So next slide po. Sa next slide po, papakita natin. So ano po ba yung clinical trial? So ito nga po ay study na ginagamit sa tao. At dahil tao siya, napaka-stricto po natin yan. Dahil ito ay mga tao na walang sakit. Pero papayag po sila, natuturukan sila ng isang bakuna na ini-investigate pa lamang para makatulong sila sa pag-develop ng vaccine na ito na gagamitin ng buong mundo. So ang tinitingnan po natin dito una ay safety and efficacy. So kailangan po sigurado tayo na ang isang bakuna ay safe. Ibig sabihin, mas malaki ang kanyang benefit kaysa po sa risk sa isang tao. At effective siya. It should be able to induce an immune reaction and protect you from the COVID-19 infection. Now, bakit po natin siya na-regulate? Piniregulate po kasi natin ito ng FDA dahil kailangan full ang protection ng human rights ng isang tao. Walang pwedeng pilitin sumali sa clinical trial. Lahat po ito voluntary. Hindi rin naman po sila pwedeng ma-entice ng bayad na malaki. Dahil kawawa naman, pag mahirap ka, sasali ka dahil kikita ka. So kailangan po ito ay talagang hindi po siya pagkakakitaan. Pero at the same time, each and every patient who will join, kailangan po, assured din tayo na kapag meron sa kanilang naramdaman, ay merong ospital na tatanggap sa kanila kung saan sila gagamutin at yung kumpanya ay gagastos sa kanilang pagkaka-ospital and make sure po na walang masamang mangyayari sa kanila. At hindi po kahit sino ay pwedeng gumawa ng clinical trial. Who may do a clinical trial? Only a clinical research organization na meron pong license to operate sa FDA. So meron pong opisina yan. Kailangan po merong makikita po natin ang kanilang mga miyembro, mga nakapag-aral po ng pag-research. Kailangan po kumpleto sila ng kanilang pong background, yung kanilang pong curriculum vitae, makikita natin, and trained sila on clinical research. So hindi po lahat ang pwede. Makikita po natin doon na babantayan po natin yan ng FDA at saka maaari po silang mag-apply sa atin. Next slide, please. So ngayon po, paano po ba nag-a-apply ng clinical trial dito sa atin? Ang common po natin na clinical trials ay FDA po talaga nag-a-apply. Pero dito po sa tinatawag natin COVID-19, dahil bagong-bago po ito, naggawa po ang gobyerno ng sub-technical working group under the IATF na namamakala po sa vaccine development. At ang Department of Science and Technology ay meron pong vaccine expert panel. Mga 12 po ito na eksperto sa bakuna na tumitingin para pag meron pong gusto mag-trial dito, sisilipin muna nila yung phase 1, phase 2 trial ba niya, maganda ang resulta. Pag na-assure po ng VEP at pumasa sa kanila, sa unang repaso nila, then ini-endorse na po nila yun sa FDA para sa aming regulatory review. So pag ngayon po, meron na silang isang na-endorse sa atin for regulatory review. At nag-submit na po yan ng application po kahapon, nagbayad na rin po ng fee. At pag ganoon, meron po tayong 14 days ang FDA to do the regulatory review. So meron po kaming mga scientifico na titingin doon po sa kanyang protocol, no, o yung pong methodology ng ito pong study na to. Ang FDA naman po titingnan yung administrative documents tungkol sa vaccine na under investigation. Titingnan po natin ang safety at yung quality kung saan siya ginagawa. At meron din po tayo, of course, ethics board. Yung ethics board, titingnan din po to make sure that everything will be done ethically in consideration of the rights of each and every participant and ma-assure po yung kanilang safety. After that, after 2 weeks po, titingnan po natin, pagsasama-samahin natin lahat ng mga reports ng grupong iyan. Pagkatapos within 1 week po ay maglalabas ng desisyon ng FDA kung papayagan ang grupo na ito na ituloy ang kanilang clinical trial or hindi. Kapag naman po sila ay nag-clinical trial na napayagan na, kailangan po silang mag-upload sa isang clinical registry na online. Nakalagay po doon ang status na ina-update monthly, no? Kung ano po ang mangyayari sa study. Meron po silang progress reports na ginagawa po at sinasabit sa FDA. At syempre po yung safety reporting. Kailangan po nakikita natin kung magkakaroon ng safety concern. May pasyente na nagkaroon ng serious adverse event o kaya nakakita tayo ng possible na connected sa vaccine, then we have to investigate this and then decide kung tutuloy po ang clinical trial na to o hindi. Next slide please. So ito po yung mga bawal, no? Kapag po merong clinical trial na nangyayari, bawal po na i-promote yung produkto. Hindi po pwede nilang sabihin na itong aming produkto na tinatrial sa Pilipinas ay sigurado po itong safe and effective. Dahil hindi pa nga po tayo sigurado, kaya pa po siya under clinical trial. So pag meron din po kayo, minsan may bali-balita, may nagbebenta daw po ng vaccines, ng mga clinical trial vaccines at pwede na daw magpapakuna. Kaya po sila under investigation dahil hindi pa po sigurado ang kanilang safety and efficacy. Hindi po maaaring ibenta yan, hindi maaaring i-promote, and they cannot commercially distribute it or hindi po pwedeng mag-test marketing ng isang investigational product, parang sampling, bawal din po yun. At kung ang kumpanya naman ay nakita na maganda ang resulta or pangit ang resulta ng kanilang clinical trial, kahit po dinistahin nila ito ng 6 na buwan, pero on 3 months pa lang, nakita na nila na maganda talaga itong produktong ito, hindi na po dapat nila pahabain pa, no? Ayusin na nila yung report at magparehistro na sila. At the same time, kung on the first, second month, nakita naman talaga maraming adverse event at pangit siya, wag na po kailangang ituloy. Kapag maaga pa makita na natin na may convincing po, no, na resulta, kailangan itigil na po ang isang clinical trial. Next slide po. Now ngayon po, kapag tapos na ang clinical trial, pwede na pong magparehistro ang isang vaccine. Ibig sabihin, hihingi na po sila ng marketing authorization. Hindi po lahat ng clinical trial ng vaccine ay mag-clinical trial dito sa Pilipinas. In the same way na hindi naman po lahat ng gamot na nandito binibenta sa atin ngayon ay nag-clinical trial dito sa atin or lahat ng vaccine for any other diseases, hindi naman po lahat ng vaccine or gamot ay nag-clinical trial sa lahat ng bansa. Pero kailangan may ipakita lang na po nila na maaari din siyang gamitin dito sa atin. So sino po ba ang kailangang mag-register? All biological products that are to be used for immunization, both by the private sector and the government. Wala pong maaaring gamitin na bakuna sa Pilipinas na hindi po registered at approved ng FDA. Kahit po sa private siya or kahit sa gobyerno. Nasa sa batas po yun. Pangalawa, bakit po kailangan mag-register? Kasi kailangan po nating ma-evaluate ang isang produkto at kailangan po mabigyan natin siya ng tinatawag na Certificate of Product Registration para makita na talagang meron po siyang sertifikasyon na maaari po siyang ibenta din sa Pilipinas dahil nasuri na natin siya. At sino po ang maaaring mag-register? Hindi din naman po kahit sino ay maaaring mag-register ng gamot. No? Mga establishment lamang, halimbawa po manufacturer, importers, who are licensed by the FDA to operate, no, ng ganito, ng pag-import ng gamot at saka pag-distribute ng gamot or pag-manufacture ng gamot. Next slide po. So ito po, ang sinasabit po nila, tayo po ay sumusunod sa ano, no? Meron po tayong ASEAN harmonization. So meron tayong sa buong ASEAN, mga member countries, isa lang po ang ano, no? Isa lang yung kanyang format. We have a common technical document requirements, standard set by ano, no? By the whole ASEAN, And then of course, yung local FDA, meron din tayong standards. Ang WHO po ngayon ay regular din po kami nakikipag-meeting sa kanila kasi magsiset tayo nga ng standards kung ano ang acceptable vaccine. For example, level of effectiveness ba? 70% ba dapat ang level niya o 60% o 50%? Ito po ba dapat ay itong minor lamang ang adverse reactions katulad ng lagnat o pananakit? So ito po ay ginagawa po ngayon natin katulong ng WHO at gagamitin po nating panuntunan yan, no, sa pag-check ng mga applicants natin. Ang evaluation po, usually mga 45 to 60 days po yan. Dahil titingnan po natin, kailangan maipakita nila na kung lalo na po kung hindi na clinical trial dito sa Pilipinas, na ito ay magagamit din sa mga kalahi natin. Halimbawa po, naggawa sila ng clinical trial sa isang bansa na may maraming Pilipino. Kailangan pakita nila sa atin yung data galing sa mga Pilipino doon at makita na it works on people who are like us or Asians very similar to us at walang adverse effects. Kailangan din po mapakita dahil hindi po dito sa atin ginawa yung bakuna, no? Maaring galing sa Estados Unidos, sa UK, sa China, kailangan maipakita rin po yung stability ng produkto na ginawa doon, tapos dinala po dito sa Pilipinas kung saan medyo mas mainit ang panahon, mas humid, at saka may transit po yun. So kailangan ma-prove din po yung stability ng produkto pagdating po dito sa ating environmental conditions. No? And then, after that processing, pag-decide din po ang FDA kung bibigyan siya ng CPR o letter of disapproval. So hindi po lahat ng nag-a-apply ay na-approve. Ganon din po ang clinical trial. Pwede po kayo ma-approve, pwedeng ma-disapprove. Ngayon ko po, kapag binigyan na natin siya ng Certificate of Product Registration, ibig sabihin magagamit na po ang bakuna, maibibenta na rito, or pwede na po gamitin sa public. Ang importante po ngayon yung ating adverse events following immunization na monitoring. Dahil ito po ay bagong-bagong bakuna, we will have to monitor together with the Department of Health, both the private sector and the public sector. Lahat po ng mababakunahan nito, kapag nagkaroon po ng adverse events, kailangan pong ma-report yan sa FDA, kailangan susuriin po natin, meron tayong national community dyan, at titingnan if the adverse event is due to the vaccine or not. Para po mabantayan natin at malaman natin kung kailangan tayong mag-pause, o kung kailangan nating bawiin, for example, ang CPR ng produktong ito at kailangan itigil talaga yung pagpapakuna. So there's going to be a lot more work, no, after po ng registration and actual implementation. Meron po tayong kailangan very, very strict monitoring for adverse events. Next slide po. So in a nutshell, yun po ang kailangan pagdaanan, no, ng isang produkto. So tama, Sec. Harry, no, hindi naman po lahat kailangang maggawa ng clinical trial dito sa Pilipinas. But they will have to prove that the vaccine will work in Filipinos and that it's going to be safe and stable given the conditions in the country.
Sir, maraming salamat. Pero nung kailan po naging panauhin namin si Ambassador Chito Santa Romana, ating ambassador to China, sabi niya anytime inaasahan nila na may isang bakuna na ma-approve ang Chinese FDA. Considering your processes po, how long will it take para ma-approve din po ng FDA natin dito sa Pilipinas ang emergency use noong ganong COVID vaccine na posible nang maaprubahan kahit anong oras na ngayon sa China?
Ang requirement po talaga natin na kailangan approve siya sa whole country. No? Kung kamukha nito na approve po sa kanila as an emergency use license, then they can apply with us. And then, usually po kasi ang mga difficulty natin dyan, yung mga translation ng data, at ipapakita po sa atin. Pero yun nga po, siguro ang natin, mga 45 to 60 days ang ating processing. Except po kung talagang very compelling, no? Makikita natin na napakaganda talaga ng datos, at lalo na kung makakuha po ng WHO pre-qualification. Yan pong mga bagay na yan ay nakakapagpabilis po ng mga pagproseso ng mga produkto dito po sa FDA.
Okay. Maraming salamat po. No? So kung 45 to 60 days, may pag-asa pala na meron tayong ma-approve dito sa Pilipinas. Kung merong ma-approve nga sa China, gaya ng report ni Ambassador Santa Romana. Maraming salamat. Kasama rin po natin si Sahar Pharma Representative Mr. Adil Deji Biria. Alam niyo po, explain ko lang po, He was referred to us by Presidential Assistant on Entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion, dahil kinakailangan po natin ng resource person kung anong mangyayari no, doon sa pagtransport ng bakuna na babayaran natin o ibibigay sa atin papunta rito sa Pilipinas. Ang problema po nito kasi, ang mga bakuna kinakailangan sub-zero temperature ang transportation. So kasama po natin ang ating kaibigan sa pribadong sektor. Sir, pwede bang i-detalye nyo sa amin kung ano yung mga hakbang na gagawin para maangkat natin ang isang aprobadong vaccine kung magkaroon na ng ganyang aprobadong vaccine? Sabihin po natin na manggagaling sa China. Ano po yung mga logistics na kinakailangan para makarating po dito sa Pilipinas? The floor is yours, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having me here. So the challenges that we have right now are unprecedented because we've never had the need to be able to distribute a vaccine at this kind of a scale. As mentioned, there's a requirement for sub-zero temperatures, and these temperatures can go as cold as the coldest temperature in the Arctic, in the Antarctica, the coldest temperature in Antarctica. And doing this kind of distribution, our company has been in distribution of vaccines for decades now and pharmaceutical products. And from our experience, what we have developed is a network of distribution for vaccines from -2 to 8 degrees. But when these COVID vaccines come along, this is completely something that we have not experienced. And at this scale, whereby we are trying to vaccinate, let's say, 30 million of the population, there's a lot of complexities involved. If you look at the air transport industry, we have to take a look there in terms of maximizing how many vaccines can be transported without sacrificing on the stability of the product. And of course, there is also the challenge on the last mile, whereby it has to be administered in time without, again, sacrificing on the potency of the product. So all these factors involved here, I think in the Philippines, we do have challenges that we need to overcome in terms of laying out the infrastructure for this kind of distribution. And I believe the FDA is doing a great job in terms of the regulatory framework. They have a robust framework there. But in tandem with that, what we have to do is, as an industry, we all have to come together, including the government, the private sector, to really lay out this foundation for really low temperature storage and transport from one point to the other. I believe the other solutions the industry is looking at is kind of a fill and finish model, whereby the Philippines would import the vaccine in bulk, and then there will be a fill and finish facility. So that way we are able to shorten the distance from production location to administration. But of course, we also have to consider that we do have to build freezer farms. This is something that is being done in developed countries, and that is something that is important to us if we want to be able to roll out this vaccine successfully. There are many candidates now, as mentioned as well previously, and all of them require different temperatures. But of course, we will have to cater for the different temperature requirements. So this infrastructure would have to be interoperable, and it has to be throughout the whole supply chain. At the moment, at the airport, for example, we have to fit them with receiving these kind of vaccines on a large scale as well.
So thank you very much, sir. You're telling us that we need to build sub-zero infrastructure from the time it arrives at the airport, and we need a facility at the airport, sub-zero storage facility, as well as sub-zero transportation to deliver them for eventual vaccination. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we as a company are working on it. And in fact, we are looking to help our industry partners get on board as well. So we do have the foundation once the vaccine does roll out in the months ahead. So we are working on that. At the moment, our company is also very heavily involved in saliva testing and threat-based testing. So we're trying to stay ahead of the curve. We're trying to meet the need of the pandemic to make sure we bring all the technological solutions on time. And especially for this distribution of the vaccine at this kind of temperature, we are heavily looking into it. And we do hope we will have good news and a good model and a broad network to do this, along with the government units as well as our local industry partners.
Dr. Domingo said that in case tomorrow, China FDA approves for emergency use a vaccine, it will take 40 to 65 days to approve it also here in the Philippines. 40 to 65 days, is that enough time for the industry, the private sector, and government to build this infrastructure for the vaccine?
Yeah, so this, I think what would happen is it would be a progressive approach whereby we would be having certain existing capacity that we have that we can tap on. And then from there on out, we can prioritize firstly on the people that need it the most. And then we can grow the administration rate after that in terms of how many doses are being given. So it will be a step-by-step approach. But at the moment, I believe there isn't enough capacity to go full scale once the vaccine is approved. So we're looking at a timeline of the first quarter of next year for the industry to catch up and come together and build this full supply chain for cold storage and cold chain.
Sir, we hope to invite you again, and perhaps in the next time, if we could ask you to do like a flow chart of sort so that the people will know the different steps now required in order to bring the vaccine to the people. Thank you very much. Please join us for our open
Thank you
forum.
so much.
Now we call on Yusek Roque now for our open forum, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Secretary Roque. Question from Laila Salaveria of Inquirer. Why was there a need to issue the memo to DOJ to investigate allegations of corruption in the entire government when there is already the Office of the Ombudsman and the PACC?
Well, I guess it's the president emphasizing that in the remaining 2 years of his term, he will give utmost priority to the fight against corruption. And of course, there is no prohibition, so it is allowed. And whether we like it or not, even if there is an Office of the Ombudsman, the biggest public prosecutor is still under the Department of Justice, because the number of prosecutors that we have under the DOJ are simply probably 20 times more than the lawyers that they have at the Office of the Ombudsman.
Second question, what can the DOJ do that the other anti-corruption agencies cannot do?
Yun nga po, mas marami tayong piskal na po pwede mag-imbestiga. At aasistihan po ang ating mga piskal ng kapulisan at ng NBI at ng yung ating opisino laban sa red tape, yung ating PA, yung Presidential Anti-Graft Commission. So marami pong aasiste at marami pong mga piskal na po pwede mag-conduct ng investigation kung ikukumpira po natin sa limitadong personnel ng Office of the Ombudsman.
Is the President's directive to the DOJ a reflection of his lack of satisfaction with the efforts of other agencies that are supposed to address corruption?
Hindi naman po siguro. Ang gusto lang talaga niya maiwang legacy na lininis niya ang gobyerno sa natitirang panahon ng kanyang termino.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Yusek. Punta tayo kay Joyce Balancho, please.
Yes, Secretary, dun po sa utos ni Pangulong Duterte to investigate DPWH corruption, what is his timeline for this? Meron po ba siyang binigay na definite deadline to the mega task force that you mentioned para po magbigay ng report kay Pangulong Duterte?
Yesterday po was the deadline. He wants it as soon as possible.
Deadline po, sir, ng resulta ng investigation?
That's what I'm saying. I'm speaking figuratively, of course. He wants it done yesterday, which means it has to be done at the soonest time possible. He wants to see them behind bars para magsilbi pong halimbawa na mabawasan nga ang korupsyon dyan sa mga ahensya gaya ng DPWH, Customs at iba pa.
Alright, sir, si President Duterte, all praises kay DPWH Secretary Mark Villar will still be covered dito sa investigation ng DPWH kahit po nagpapahayag ng kumpiyansa ang Pangulo sa kanya.
Well, wala pong dahilan para magduda sa integridad si Presidente kay Secretary Villar, a view which I share and everyone in the cabinet shares. Alam mo, unfortunately talaga, may kinalaman din talaga yung abilidad ng tao para matukso ng korupsyon. Pero kung ganitong kayaman naman kasi yung secretary at alam natin na very well educated, educated in the best universities in the world, and meron ding untainted record as a public servant, having served as congressman also of Las Piñas, talaga naman pong he is beyond doubt, no? And is certainly above corruption in DPWH. So, ganyan po katindi ang tiwala ni Presidente, ang tiwala ko, at tiwala ng ibang gabinete kay Secretary Mark Villar.
So just to be categorical about it, hindi na po siya sasakupin ng investigation ng Mega Task Force.
Well, the President, of course, will leave it to the task force, pero ang opinion po ni Presidente ay malinaw, wala po namang bahid ng kahit anong korupsyon si Secretary Villar, which we all share in the Cabinet.
Sir, dun sa PhilHealth, nabanggit ni Pangulo, hindi na niya bubuwagin, no? Yung PhilHealth. Does this mean na siya'y kontento na sa performance ni bagong PhilHealth President Dan Tigueran sa paglilinis sa korupsyon?
Let's just say, inaantay pa po niya yung mga kasong isasampa pa sa iba pang mga personnel at officials ng PhilHealth, no? Pero kumpiyansa po siya na dahil maraming ang nag-resign na at maraming na suspend na, meron ng malaking pagbabago dyan sa PhilHealth. Malaki na po nagawa natin sa paglinis ng PhilHealth. Pagpapatuloy na lang po yan.
Last na lang po for me, Secretary. Maliban po dun sa recommendations na Metro Manila mayors, what were the other considerations ng IATF at ni Pangulong Duterte to still place Metro Manila under GCQ until end of November?
Well, malinaw po yan, no? Meron tayong daily attack rate, meron tayong 2-week average attack rate, meron tayong hospital critical hospital utilization rate. Lahat po yan ay kinonsidera, pati ang mga social at economic factors. Sa Huwebes po or sa Lunes, depending on availability po of USEC ng DOH who is in charge of classification, USEC David, humingi po ako ng permiso at ginarant naman ako ng permiso ng IATF na ipipresenta po sa taong bayan itong mga datos na pinagbasihan po ng Interagency Task Force nang maintindihan naman po ng mga tao. Unang-una, nakabase po tayo sa siyensya at ito po ay a whole of nation approach. Hindi lang po 10 dalubhasa. Siguro po hindi bababa sa 100 dalubhasa ang nagtutulong-tulong para magbigay itong rekomendasyon nito at ipakita sa inyo na hindi po umaasa ang gobyerno ni Presidente Duterte sa kahit sinong ibang mga dalubhasa para gumawa ng ganitong desisyon. So mabuting balita po yan, pinayagan ako ng IATF na i-share po ang datos natin sa publiko na naging basihan ng rekomendasyon kay Presidente, pero gagawin po natin ito matapos po magdesisyon ng ating Presidente.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Joyce. Punta na tayo kay Yusek Roque, please.
Secretary, question from Sam Edenilla of Business Mirror. Ang una niyang tanong, na-approve na po kaya ni President Duterte ang and release of budget release for Bayanihan 2 for at least 4 agencies? If no, kailan daw po ito marirelease?
Nako, mas mabuti pong ginawa ni Presidente. Binigyan niya po ng delegated authority si DBM Secretary Avisado para mag-approve na ng release. So hindi na po yan dadaan sa Office of the Executive Secretary. Alinsunod po dito, meron pong 7 departamento na marilisan ng pondo ngayon galing sa Bayanihan 2. Ito po ang DTI, 100 million for shared service facilities para sa Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa Program. Ang NDRRMF, 5 billion for augmentation of the NDRRMM fund. Ang DOLE, 8 billion para sa Adjustment Measures Program and tulong panghanap buhay para sa ating displaced and disadvantaged workers. DSWD, 6 billion for assistance to individuals in crisis situation and sustainable livelihood program. Department of Agriculture, 11.632 billion for initial submission for plant program. DOH, 20.575 billion for health-related responses such as HRH, augmentation of DOH hospitals, specialist allowance, actual hazard duty pay, free life insurance, accommodation, transportation, and meals for health workers, and other compensation for public and private health workers. DOLE, 5.1 billion para po sa AKAP at nag-release na rin po ng 500 million para sa funding requirements under the Local Government Support Fund out of a total appropriation of 1.5 billion. Lahat po yan na-release ng DBM today dahil hindi na po dadaan sa Office of the President, delegated na po si Secretary Wendell Avisado to approve the release of these amounts.
Second question po niya, nagkaroon na kaya ng decision ng IATF or si President Rodrigo Duterte regarding the proposed subsidy ng micro and small firms to help them pay the 13-month pay of their workers?
Malinaw na po yan, pinag-aralan, wala pong pagkukunan ng subsidy. So ang ginawa na lang po natin, dahil mandatory naman po talaga ang pagbayad ng 13-month pay, pautangin natin yung kinakailangan mangutang para mabayaran ang 13th month pay. Ang na-identify na natin dyan, ang mga rural banks at saka yung small business corporation na meron pong 10 bilyon. 6 na bilyon po dyan para sa mga tourism-related industries, yung 4 billion para sa mga iba pang mga small and medium enterprises. So, aasistihan po natin ang hindi makabayad dahil talaga namang naghirap tayo dahil sa pandemya. Pautangin po natin sila ng sa ganon, lahat po tayo ay magkaroon ng Merry Christmas. Joseph Morong. Joseph Morong. Okay, kung wala pa si Joseph, si Trisha muna. Trisha Tirada.
Hi, sir.
Yun na pala si Joseph. Yes,
Sorry,
Joseph.
nagka-problema yung signal.
Napuyat
Sir, yung
ka
sa
kagabi,
corruption
no?
lang, no?
Napuyat ka kagabi, no?
Oh, sir. Hindi, pati gumising na maaga. Anyway, sir, yung
Yun
sa
ang pinakaayaw mo,
corruption,
no? Yung gising sa umaga, no?
no, because we work late at night, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, first, yung sa corruption muna, no? Ang sabi ni Presidente is that, okay, he has a campaign promise of solving the corruption in 6 months. And then he said last night na parang, teka muna, mukhang hindi, walang nangyayari at lalong lumalala. So, sir, what made the President say this and what has been done or what has been in the last 4 years of his administration?
Alam mo, sabihin na lang natin na using his own personal standards, hindi satisfied si Pangulo sa paglinis sa gobyerno. At alam nyo, naging congressman naman itong si ating Pangulo, naging mayor din. So pag sinabi niyang may corruption sa DPWH, alam po niya ang sinasabi niya. No? It's really a systems problem, no? Na kinakailangan talagang tutukan. Nandyan po yung PhilHealth, no? Na at least sa administrasyon niya at ito ng mga kabalastugan naman sa PhilHealth, ilang presidente na rin ang dumaan dyan, no? At talagang yung mga sindikato dyan, napakalalim ng kanilang penetration. Ngayon po, isa-isa namang nawawala ng ugat yung mga mafia dyan, no? Yung mga malapit niyang mga kaibigan na merong whiff of corruption, sipa, tanggal, no? At kahit sino pa man sila, no? Tingin ko wala namang kaduda-duda na seryoso ang presidente. So ito po ay, kumbaga, leaving a legacy. At ang legacy niya talaga ay patunayan na kung talaga nang tututukan at gagamitin ng political will, talaga nang pong mababawasan ng korupsyon, bagamat aminado na tayo na hindi tuluyang mawawala ang korupsyon.
Sir, address lang so to those who may not, probably believe the sincerity of this campaign. Kasi what can be done in 2 years that was not done in the last 4 years of his administration.
Ikaw naman, Joseph, 5% lang naman sila at kahit anong gawin ng presidente, hindi sila magiging satisfied. Hayaan na natin sila. They're entitled to their own opinion.
Okay. Sir, yun pong sa vaccine, no? Right now, ang fact is, walang cold chain storage facility ang Pilipinas. And it seems that we have to build that infrastructure from the ground up. So how much will that cost the government? Because we need that just in case China is ready to give or to distribute their own vaccine kung sila yung mauna. So how much will that cost the government? And we do not have a cold chain storage facility as of now, correct?
Well, perhaps our guests from the private sector can give us an estimate. And ito naman po ay shared cost ng private sector at ng gobyerno. Sir, can you give us an estimate kung magkano kakailanganin for the cold storage facilities for the entire nation?
So, I mean, if we look at it on a unit basis, let's just talk about a freezer itself by itself. So a freezer that can store, let's say, 40,000 doses at -70 degree, for example, that goes for around 10 to 15,000 US dollar per a deep freezer, right? And if we are trying to build a freezer farm, for example, then we're looking at 500 or so freezers of such specification. And how this happens is that this is just the cost of the equipment, and then there's other cost, which is for the implementation and maintenance and so on. But I believe the most important part right now is that Philippines should procure the supply of these equipments before they run short, and then the prices will jack up naturally. So that's why I am here and I'm talking about this. So we are ready for this in advance, and not later when when the supply for these equipments is short, and then we'll have to pay a higher price for it.
Sir, in your own private company, how much are you allotting for acquiring these cold storage facilities, and for how many dosage are you targeting?
So at the moment, we are still in discussions with our partners as to the production capacity and the doses that we are bringing to the Philippines. And naturally, our scale will follow that. So there's no exact dollar or peso value that I have right now, but we're trying to maximize. So we'll be heavily invested in this, but there's no exact figures at the moment. We're still doing the mathematics for this.
Sir, may pera tayo for that?
Yes, pero naman po ang gobyerno.
Sir, konti lang kay Yusek Domingo and then one last for you later.
Okay.
Yusek Domingo, sir, paki-explain lang yung sa process, no, yung cold chain storage facility. So bakit kailangan ng ganun? Para lang malaman ng ating mga kababayan, and said, dapat ma-procure na bago pa man magkaagawan ulit dun sa equipments, no? Can you explain the procedure? Bakit kailangan malamig yung paglalagyan ng bakuna? At kaya ba natin, sir, itong magawa until before April?
Kasi talaga ang bakuna po napaka-sensitive niya. No? Hindi siya parang gamot na tableta na maaring i-transport basta lamang. Each and every vaccine, depende po kung alin ang bibilihin natin, meron siyang temperature na set kung saan maaari lamang siya mag-store. In fact, each and every box, for example, ng vaccine, meron niyang indicator, no, na mag-change yung kulay niyan kapag lumagpas siya doon sa temperature na set. At halimbawa po, nakalagay ang vaccine na ito ay 2 to 8 degrees lamang siya dapat. Kapag nalagay po yan sa lugar na 10 degrees, biglang mag-change po ang kulay niyan at yung buong lote na yon hindi na pwedeng gamitin. Itatapon na yon, no? So, yung iba naman minus 70 degrees. So each and every every box that you get will have an indicator to make sure that it has stayed within minus 70 degrees from the time it left the factory until it's brought to the pier, lagay sa container, na ilipat sa van ng DOH, na ilagay sa freezer ng DOH, at bago siya maibakuna. So every time na nagkaroon tayo ng break sa cold chain, you might lose the efficacy of a vaccine. Kaya very, very important po talaga na nakaset up na ito. At ito naman talaga ang ginagawa ng DOH ngayon to make sure that the cold chain is ready. In case bumili na tayo ng vaccine, to make sure that it is not broken and the integrity of the vaccine is intact from the time of production until it is actually used.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. Pero Yusek, meron akong follow-up question doon, no? Sa ngayon po, magkano capacity natin sa RITM, which I understand has a sub-zero capacity, and ilan pong delivery trucks ang meron tayo, just in case makakakuha tayo ng kaunting bakuna man lang?
Yun pong sa RITM, meron po ang DOH dyan na vaccine facility. But it's enough for yung mga routine vaccinations natin. And we usually only vaccinate about 10 to 20 million people, children, kasi pang bata po. So yan po yung mga kayang hold niyan. At alam ko po na bumibili nga po sila ng mga truck na may cold storage capability. Pero sa ngayon po, wala pa po tayong nagre-rent po ang DOH every time na magta-transport po tayo ng mga ganitong mga bakuna. Pero alam ko po, nagpaplano na silang bumili para nga po din sa darating.
Sir, just one last point, please.
Sige na, go.
Secretary. Sir,
Go ahead.
meron lang ako natanggap na letter, no? I'm sure makaka-relate ka din dito. Yung sa SSS pensioner. This is a letter from a 79-year-old pensioner na hindi pa natatanggap yung, they were promised, she said, na 3,000 pension from the government, from President Duterte, pero natatanggap nila is 1,000. Sabi niya,
Nawala ka, Joseph. Nawala si Joseph. Joseph, yung letter na pinadala mo sa akin, I will forward it to the SSS president and will get back to you. Okay? Yusek Roque, please.
Okay, Secretary, question from Virgil Lopez ng GMA News Online. According to the Octa Research Group, without the testing facilities provided by the Philippine Red Cross, the government's isolation and quarantine and contact tracing programs are crippled because the LGUs do not know whether or not a person is infected with COVID-19 within the 24 to 48-hour time period required. What's the palace reaction to this? Will the government be able to resolve the impasse between PhilHealth and Philippine Red Cross soon?
We simply disagree po, no? Kasi hindi lang naman PNRC ang nagte-test. We have 115 licensed RT-PCR laboratories and 36 gene expert laboratories, no? So hindi po tayo nakasalalay sa iisang testing facility ng PNRC. We disagree po with Octa Research.
Second question niya, the Octa Research Group also said the easing of restrictions in public transportation will trigger an increase in new COVID-19 cases in the National Capital Region in the next 2 weeks. Did the government expect this scenario?
Again, we disagree po, no? Tingin ko po, epektibo po yung ating communication na si Presidente nang humingi sa lahat na mag-mask, maghugas at mag-iwas. At dyan naman po makikita ang galing ng Pilipino. Alam po nila na kinakailangan pag-ingatan ng kanilang buhay para sila po ay makapaghanap buhay. Again, we disagree with the research group. Tingin ko po, gagawin ng Pilipino ang lahat na dapat na gawin dahil importante sa kanila na makapaghanap buhay na muli. Pero papaalalahanan ko lang po sila ha, yung mga dalubhasa po na nagrekomenda na bawasan ang social distancing, puro doktor po ito magagaling. Yung mga Dr. Cabral, mga Dr. Dairit, Dr. Mengita Padilla, and I'm sorry, no? Itong mga doktor po ito ay respetado. Hindi ko po alam kung sino yung doktor ng Octa Group, no? Ang sabi po nila, hindi naman dapat tumaas, miski bawasan ng spacing sa public transportation, basta susunod po sa 7 commandments. Ulitin ko po, anong 7 commandments? Kinakailangan may face mask, kinakailangan may face shield, kinakailangan no talking and no eating. Nako, bawal pala akong kumain at magsalita, no? Kinakailangan may adequate ventilation, kinakailangan frequent and proper disinfection, dapat walang asymptomatic passenger at yung every other seat ay iobserbahan. Ito naman po ay base rin sa siyensya, no, na diniscuss po sa IATF ni Dr. Manolet Dairit, and I'm sorry, I believe them po. Trish Terada, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Secretary. Sir, yung related question po doon sa Philippine Red Cross, because yesterday you mentioned that the DOH is already talking to 8 private laboratories while Red Cross suspended its PhilHealth-funded testing. So si Senator Gordon po is saying na parang he has this impression na tinatakot daw sila when in fact, hindi naman daw sila negosyo, service-oriented po sila. And he shares kahit daw po gipit sila, they even reached out and did tests in Favela. Kumbaga the point is, they're demanding for payment so they can continue their operations. Hindi raw po puro pangako lang. Sir, how would you wish to respond to this?
Wala po kami tinatakot, but we have 115 PCR test facilities and 35 gene expert machines po. Kaya nga po natin in-improve ang ating testing capacity nang hindi tayo nakasalalay sa isang organisasyon lamang. Sa akin po, kung talagang hindi natin mapipilit ang PRC na bumalik, maski ang offer po ngayon ay 50% na babayaran, wala po tayong magagawa. Kinakailangan humanap po ng mga alternatibo. At yun lang naman pong ginagawa natin. Gumagawa tayo ng hakbang para tuluyan nating maasistihan ang ating mga kababayan. Wala po yung mga pananakot. Now, bukod pa po doon, yun nga po, no, yung 8 na nakikipag-usap na tayo mga pribadong mga laboratorio. Alam niyo ko naman po kasi, dahil sa mga pribado, negosyo po yan. Can you imagine po, kung ikaw ay negosyante, makakapasok ka sa airport, magkakaroon ka ng pagkakataon na i-test ang PCR test na dati-rate exclusive sa PNRC. So, of course, nag-uunahan po yung mga pribadong laboratorio na yan. Ang ating hinihingi lamang, dahil babayaran naman ito ng PhilHealth, dapat yung same rate na sinisingil ng PRC. Pero kakausapin po namin ngayon yung mga mas mababang sinisingil, yung NKTI, Philippine Children's Hospital, Lung Center at Perpetual Health. Baka dapat sila yung unang manguna sa airport at sa pantalan na mas mababa pa nga ang pupwedeng bayaran ng ating mga kababayan. 1,750 hanggang 2,000 lang po ang sinisingil ng mga testing labs na ito.
Secretary, sinasabi po ng PRC na apparently kompleto na po sila with all the documents, the auditing requirements. It's just that nagbabago-bago daw po yung kontrata. May chance po ba na mabayaran fully itong PRC?
Yan
And
po yung
for them to go
opinion
back
ng
to-
ang opinion po ng DOJ. They cannot make an opinion dahil nakabase po yan sa submission ng requirements at saka compliance with audit procedures.
Sir,
Ang pakiusap lang naman po
topic,
natin is garantyado na ng presidente na babayaran 100%. Ibibigay na ang 50%. Bakit naman hindi pa ituloy nga ang testing?
Sir, on another topic, may timeline po bang tinitignan si Pangulo doon sa creation ng Department of OFW? I understand he said soon, but
opo.
is he eyeing kung first quarter of next year?
Well, sa lalong mabilis na panahon po, gusto ni Presidenteng mabuo yung departamento na yan at sigurado naman po ako na dahil dito, isa-certify as urgent yan ng mas mapabilis po ang pagpasa niyan bilang isang batas.
Thank you, Secretary. Salamat po.
Yusek Roque, please.
Secretary, question from Maricel Halili of TV5. Why is it necessary to direct DOJ to investigate corruption in the entire government, given that the Ombudsman and other government agencies like PACC are already doing the job?
Nasagot ko na po yan. Mas marami pong mga tauhang gobyerno na nakatutok sa korupsyon, mas mabuti.
Second question niya, what's the assurance that there won't be an overlap on the mandate of the DOJ task force and other government agencies like PACC in the fight against corruption? How will the job of DOJ task force differ from other government agencies?
Itong mega task force po, iimbitahin po ang PACC, ang mga constitutional bodies kung gusto nilang sumapi, gaya ng kanilang partisipasyon doon sa task force PhilHealth. No? So wala naman po yan magiging overlap. Unang-una, mayroon pong MOA sa panig po ng Ombudsman at ng DOJ. No? Na po pwede naman po mag-imbestiga rin ang DOJ pagdating po sa mga kaso sa paglabag ng Anti-Corrupt and Graft Practices Act.
Question from Rose Novenario of Hataw. Ano daw po ang magiging papel ng PACC ngayong inatasan na ni Pangulong Duterte ang DOJ para magsiyasat sa korupsyon sa lahat ng ahensya ng gobyerno? Hindi ba siya kontento sa performance ng PACC?
Again po, fact-finding po ang PACC, makikipag-ugnayan po siya at sigurado po ako, kabahagi ang PACC nitong mega task force na ito. Okay, punta naman tayo kay MJ Blanca Flor ng Daily Tribune, please. MJ?
Good afternoon, Secretary.
Good afternoon.
Related question po ito tungkol dun sa multi-agency task force. Kasi po you mentioned about leaving a legacy. So people are probably wondering why did the president instruct the multi-agency task force only now? Bakit po hindi yung mga naunang years ng kanyang administration?
Well, kasi nga po, number one, yung gravity ng problema at pangalawa, yung karanasan natin sa Task Force PhilHealth na naging epektibo po kapag nagtutulong-tulungan ang iba't ibang sangay ng gobyerno. Hindi lang po sa ekotibo, kasama na po yung mga constitutional bodies, kagaya po ng Ombudsman, COA at ng Civil Service Commission.
And follow-up lang po, mangangailangan po ba ng separate budget itong task force na ito?
Lahat naman po yan ay nasa budget na po ng mga ekotibo. No? Ulitin ko po, yung mga constitutional bodies, they're just invited at nakikipagtulungan naman po sila. But of course, we respect their independence as found and provided for in our Constitution.
Okay po. And last question na lang po. The Congress po kasi is urging the Senate to fast-track the creation of, to pass the proposed measure creating the Department of Disaster Resilience. Secretary, I just want to ask, does the Palace remain confident na ito pong pet bill ng Pangulo ay mapapasa before his term ends?
I'm definitely po. We are very confident. dahil lahat naman po ng liderato ng parehong kamara ng ating Kongreso ay malapit na aliado ng ating presidente. Thank you. Yusek Roque again. Thank you, MJ.
Thank you po.
Question from Lay Alvis of GMA7. Ano na po ang update sa mukahing lagyan ng price cap ang RT-PCR tests? Ang sabi po ng Department of Health ay isinumite na nila sa Office of the President ang proposal. May mga ulat na umaabot na sa 20,000 pesos ang mga rush PCR test na inaalok sa mga dumarating na OFW.
Ang masasabi ko lang po dyan ay yan po ay nakabinbin ngayon sa ating Office of the Executive Secretary, pero aanunsyo ko po, meron po mga murang RT-PCR thanks to Project ARC. Dyan po kami nagpapa-RT-PCR. Philippine Children's Medical Center, National Kidney Transplant Institute, Philippine Lung Center, Perpetual Health Hospital, 1,750 hanggang 2,000. Meron pa pong mga ibang branches sa iba't ibang parte ng Pilipinas. Sa susunod po, ifa-flash natin uli yan nang malaman ng taong bayan na hindi kinakailangan magbayad ng 23,000 dahil meron naman pong 1,750 hanggang 2,000 na PCR test.
Opo, Secretary, question mula po kay para po kay FDA, kay Sir Domingo, Yusek Domingo, mula po kay Katrina Son ng GMA7. May nagsasagawa daw po ng COVID vaccine sa Makati at napuntahan na rin daw po nila ito. Ano po ang update tungkol dito?
Yusek Roque, no, so may nabalita na may nagbebenta daw ng vaccines, may mga Chinese ads pa. Pumunta yung ating mga ahente doon last week at nangako naman yung administrator nung facility na hindi daw po totoo at in fact naglabas din sila ng disclaimer. But of course, we're continuously monitoring at mukhang mapapadalas po ang ating inspection, no, doon sa facility na yon to make sure na hindi po nagbebenta or gumagamit at nag-administer ng unregistered na bakuna dito sa Pilipinas.
Thank you, Yusek. Thank you.
Yes, Melo Acuña, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. I just have 2 points for you. The President is bent on the creation of the Department of Overseas Filipinos. Do you think we have the luxury of time to marry all the mandates of the different government agencies from DFA, DOLE, OWA, POEA, and Immigration so that everything will be on streamline, Mr. Secretary?
We're very confident po. Alam mo, we pioneered in the sending of manpower as a strategy for economic development sa panahon pa ni Blas Ople, no? No panahon pa ng martial law. So napakatindi na po ng ating kakayahan at eksperyensya pagdating dito. Kinakailangan lang po i-streamline. At sa kauna-unahang pagkakataon nga, ang sabi ni Presidente, kinakailangan magkaroon sila ng sariling departamento, may sariling kalihim, nang mabilis po ang pagbibigay ng benepisyo sa ating mga bagong bayani, ang ating mga OFWs.
Mr. Secretary, may bago na nga po bang chairperson ang Climate Change Commission?
Ay, hindi ko pa po alam. Ako naman po nag-aanunsyo niyan, no? Pero wala pa ako natatanggap pong papel.
Opo, para kay Yusek Domingo sana.
Okay, Yusek Domingo.
Hapon, Yusek. Good afternoon, Yusek. Nice seeing you. First, yung mga cold storage na isa sa ayos, hindi po kaya magkaproblema sapagkat hindi pa lahat ng bahagi ng bansa ay mayroong stable na kuryente. Number one. Number two, yun po kayang leksyon na natutuhan natin sa Dengvaxia, hindi na mauulit ngayon. Salamat po.
So una po yung sa pangalawang tanong nyo. No? In fact, naglagay po sa batas natin dito sa Bayanihan 2, na bago tayo magbakuna, kailangan po merong preparation. May community preparation, kailangan po magpa-pilot muna sa isang lugar para makita ang mga problema and to make sure the community is informed. Pangatlo po, dapat very strict ang monitoring natin ng adverse events. Para po pag may makita tayo, ma-post natin agad, maimbestigahan agad, at kailangan itigil agad or ituloy agad kung wala naman po problema. So yun po, sa batas po sa Bayanihan 2 nakalagay mga safeguards natin to make sure that once we launch a new vaccination program, this is a new vaccine, na lahat po ng safeguards ay nandoon. Yun naman pong sa cold chain, Totoo po yun, napaka-challenging po talaga ng cold chains, lalo na po depende kung ano ang bakunang mabibili natin at kung anong temperature siya kailangan. Karamihan naman po ng mga transport vehicles ay ano po yan, mga self-contained naman, no? Meron po siya para power generator. Pero ang problema po talaga sa lugar na malayo. Kailangan po, aside from that, meron pa pong portable na mga, yung po dinadala po ng mga barangay health worker, no? Para maliliit na freezer, to make sure na ma-maintain siya. Kasi pag bumaba po ang temperature, umiiksi po yung shelf life ng vaccine. No? Maaari pong maging invest na 3 months, magiging 1 week na lamang at magamit siya sa agad. But it will really have to do with planning and yun pong logistics, yung pong cold chain natin, management. Magagawa naman po yan, kailangan pagplanuhan lang po talaga ng mabuti.
Maraming salamat po, Yusek. Thank you, Secretary Hali.
Thank you, Melo. Back to you, Roque, please.
Yes, Secretary, question from Vance Fernandez ng Police Files about the recent purchasing of the Department of Education ng 254 units of Mitsubishi Strada. The question now arises, was the expensive amount of vehicles and was it possible for a rediversion of funds for more immediate concerns such as our blended learning programs? And I know sinabi mo po na budget for that ay inaprubahan na before, and why unexpensive vehicles may mas cheaper naman, and one thing more na napapabayaan umano ng DepEd yung mga guro sa mga liblib na lalawigan na kailangan ng mga gamit para sa pagtuturo sa online learning.
Well, Vance, unang-una, no, 2019 budget yan. Yung kanilang need was assessed as early as 2016. At ngayon po, kailangan po talaga ng DepEd yan dahil nga po kinakailangan i-deliver ang mga modules sa mga malalayong lugar all over the Philippines. So, bakit po yan ang brand? Yan po yung nanalo sa bidding. Talaga naman pong lahat ng government procurement, dumadaan po yan sa public bidding. At yan po yung pinakamababang responsive bid na nakuha ng DepEd. Alam nyo, Vance, ultimately, it's a matter of trusting the head of office. I trust, the President trusts, and the entire Filipino nation trusts Professor Emeritus Leonor Briones. Number one, kasangga po natin siya, laban po sa korupsyon. Patuloy po natin pagtitiwala kay Professor Briones.
Last question dito para sa akin, Mr. Secretary. Spokes from Tina Mendez ng Philippine Star. Please clarify if President Duterte's order to DOJ would include investigation of alleged corruption in Congress, LGU politicians.
Well, alam niyo po, ang mandato po ng DOJ ayon sa batas na bumuo ng National Prosecutor's Office is to investigate everyone. Pero meron din po tayong mga immunities na ini-enjoy ang ating mga elected members of Congress and the Senate, pero it is not for violating anti-graft laws. So kasama po ang lahat po ng mga public officers despite the separation of powers dahil wala naman pong separate na ahensya na nag-iimbestiga ng korupsyon sa Kongreso mismo. Yan po ay kapangyarihan ng ehekutibo to implement the all laws kahit sino pa man sila.
Thank you.
Okay, last question from Pia Ranada, please.
Good afternoon, Sec. Sir, I'll go first to you and then my last two questions will be for FDA Chief Eric Domingo. Sir, the President yesterday mentioned yung kanyang commitment against corruption. But sir, a lot of critics naman are pointing out that these sound hollow because the President himself is yet to reveal his SALN, which many transparency watchdogs say is an important document for government transparency. So, sir, how does Malacañang reconcile this and why isn't this a contradiction?
We've actually discussed this before in this press briefing. Just comply with the steps required by the Ombudsman. We also have to respect the guidelines of the Ombudsman.
But sir, kasi the Ombudsman rules say that it's actually up to the President to release it. It's his, kumbaga, the ball is in his court. The Ombudsman gives him the right to say yes or no to releasing it. So why has the President not yet given his go signal for Malacañang or the Ombudsman to release his SALN?
As far as I know, there's not been any written requests for the President's SALN. Perhaps you should submit one.
Yes, sir, we've submitted several times. But they always tell us the ombudsman is to issue the SALN. But the ombudsman naman says wala pang go signal for Malacañang.
Well, I haven't seen any of your written communication, no? But again, our answer is it's a constitutional body. Let's respect guidelines issued by that office.
But sir, why the change in policy? Because in the previous 30 years, every president except for Duterte has issued their SALN.
Well, I do not know that we have changed policies. It is the ombudsman that has changed the policy of who and under what circumstance anyone can ask for these SALNs.
Okay, sige. Going on to FDA Chief Eric Domingo, if it's okay.
Yes, please. One question more.
One question lang. Sir,
Go ahead.
but sir, the first question on Sputnik V, sir, the Gamaleya Institute has supposedly given a CDA as early as August 25. It's now 2 months. Sir, have there been any problems encountered by the vaccine expert panel? Did they have to request for additional documents? And basically, what's the status, sir, of Sputnik V?
Yeah, from the last meeting with the vaccine expert panel, they're still getting more information. Kasi when Gamaleya approached us, nasa phase 2 trials pa lang sila and preparing for phase 3 trial. I think they're committed to continue with the phase 3 trial here. However, the vaccine expert panel still asking for some more documents and for some more information before they can make a full assessment of the proposal to do a clinical trial here.
So, sir, the information given initially was incomplete. Can we just get an idea of what kind of additional information the experts want from Gamaleya?
Usually, kasi the vaccine expert panel looks at the phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trial results. So baka hindi pa completed yung mga phase 2 clinical trial. This is my my assumption is that they're waiting for more details on clinical trial results than previous to the clinical trial phase 3. Mukhang meron pang hinihintay na hindi ko eksakto alam po anong documents yun. But I'm sure it has to do with the phase 1 and phase 2 trials.
Is it correct, sir, to say that the Sputnik V assessment by the government is delayed?
No, I don't think it's delayed because the vaccine expert panel actually works quite quickly. No, once all documents are complete, they can do an assessment in 1 week. Because I've seen it with the other applicants. So they're just waiting for more information to make a complete assessment.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Pia. Great hairdo. Please stay in the news profession. Don't enter showbiz. Okay. Kung wala na pong tanong, I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Domingo and Mr. Adhil. Thank you very much. I hope, Mr. Adhil, we can ask you again to be our guest with the flow chart para maintindihan po talaga ng taong bayan kung ano yung logistics involved. Thank you to the men and women of the Malacañang Press Corps as usual. Inaayos na po natin yung live, remote press briefing natin with the President. And thank you, of course, to Yusek Roque. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in today's press briefing. Until Thursday, where we will be conducting our press briefing in Panglao, Bohol. Ito po ang inyong Spox Harry Roque nagsasabi, Philippines, konting tulog na lang, we will heal as one. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.